This is a zinnia from our garden. We started growing them about 3 years ago, and since then they've quietly become one of the plants we look forward to most each summer. They sit among other flowers like small bursts of colour, oranges, yellows and soft pinks that are hard to ignore. I start by just looking. What I've always loved about zinnias is the layering, petal after petal, unfolding outwards, almost like the flower is slowly building itself over time. And then there's the centre. At first it's quite small, but as the flower ages, the inner core rises and expands. Sometimes it reveals these tiny yellow florets, little flowers inside the larger flower. It's like the bloom keeps evolving, offering a second form long after the first one opened. Even the underside is beautiful. The green structure underneath almost looks like another set of petals, firm, geometric, quietly supporting everything above it. That moment of looking and noticing always slows me down before I draw. So I begin with a quick pencil sketch, just enough to find the structure, where the petals sit, how the centre rises, how the stem holds the flower in place. Then I start laying down gouache. This gouache came from a small op-shop find, a limited set of paints that quietly shape what I can and can't do. Although I did add a white and blue from my own supply, paints that had been sitting untouched for nearly 20 years. Building the first layer slowly, a soft background blue, pinks, oranges, warm yellows. The broad shapes of the zinnia begin to settle onto the page. At this stage, it feels like the first bloom, open, colourful, complete in its own way. Just the outer flower, but with zinnias, that's never quite the end of the story, because inside that first bloom, there's usually something else waiting to appear, and that's the layer that begins to show up next. This is where the painting starts to change. The gouache layer feels calm and resolved, almost like an earlier version of my work. Careful, observational, trying to get the form right. But something about it doesn't quite feel like me anymore, so I begin to interrupt it. First with ink, not layering, more like searching, letting the pen move through the petals, finding structure, building small pockets of shadow and depth. The flower begins to separate into layers. I try pencil next, but the surface becomes too glossy, too controlled, so I reach for something else. These oil pastels came from the same op shop as the paints. Broken sticks, missing colours, just working with what's there. And the marks become looser, richer, almost covering parts of the gouache underneath. Then I return to paint again, but in smaller moments. Tiny touches of colour, building contrast between the petals. At one point I switch to pale blue, the colour of the background, and I use it to redraw the spaces between the petals. Suddenly the flower opens again, layer over layer, revealing itself, petals falling over each other like a small cascade of colour. And that's when it starts to feel closer to my own visual language again, less control, more alive. What I love about zinnias is that they don't bloom just once. The first layer opens wide, bright and confident, but then the centre slowly rises, revealing another crown of tiny flowers inside the first. A second bloom, hidden in plain sight. This painting unfolded a bit like that. The gouache felt like the outer flower, familiar, careful, complete, but the ink, pastel and loose marks became the inner crown, and maybe that's what growth in painting looks like, not replacing what comes before, but allowing another layer to emerge. For now, this is where the painting sits, one small study from the garden. If this slow practice resonates, feel free to follow along. I'm quietly rebuilding my creative flow, one small moment at a time.